You want to listen to a podcast?
By who?
Georgia GOP Congressman Doug Collins.
How is it?
The greatest thing I have ever heard in my whole life.
I could not believe my ears.
In this house, wherever the rules are disregarded, chaos and mob rule. It has been said today, where is bravery? I'll tell you where bravery is found and courage is found. It's found in this minority who has lived through the last year of nothing but rules being broken, people being put down, questions not being answered. And this majority say, be damned with anything else. We're going to impeach and do whatever we want to do. Why? Because we won an election. I guarantee you, one day you'll be back in the minority and it ain't gonna be that fun.
The Doug Collins podcast on Salem Broadcasting. Today, Kip Keefer and Terre Quillian are honored to be here filling in for Doug. We are going to have a terrific show, so don't go anywhere as we tell you why it's time to take a stand.
We are experiencing instability at every level. Our government lacks leadership, and Bidenomics has been a disaster. The economy is in a fragile state. Inflation has been a consistent issue. High interest rates have put significant pressure on the real estate market, and there have been major bank failures. And many analysts say a stock market correction is likely overdue. We have global conflicts in Europe and the Middle East that have potential to spread, but gold has soared to record highs even among the tensions. There are so many reasons that Americans should consider investments in gold and silver, and Legacy Precious Metals is the gold standard. I love Legacy Precious Metals because of their zero-hassle, education-first approach. They can help you roll your traditional IRA into a gold IRA or ship metals directly to your house. That's what I do. So go to www.legacypminvestments.com to download their free gold investment guide. And look, I've read it. You need to read it. There's so much valuable information in there. So, friends, now's the time to not roll the dice with your hard-earned money. Find out about the growth potential that gold and precious metals can offer you. Contact Legacy Precious Metals today and tell them that Doug Collins sent you. You might have heard Mike Lindell and MyPillow no longer have the support of the box stores or the shopping channels as the way they used to. They've been part of the cancel culture, so they want to pass the savings directly on to you by having a $25 extravaganza. When Mike started MyPillow, it was just one product company. With the help of his dedicated employees, they now have hundreds of products. Some of you may not even know about that. So to get the word out, I want to invite my listeners to check out the $25 extravaganza. 2-pack multi-pillow use MyPillows are just $25. MyPillow sandals, $25. There's 6-pack of towel sets, $25. Brand new 4-pack dish towels. You guessed it, just $25. And for the first time ever, the MyPillows with all new Giza fabric, just $25. All orders over $75 will see free shipping too. This amazing offer won't last long, so go to mypillow.com and use the promo code Collins, that's COLLINS, or call 800-986-3994 today. That's promo code Collins.
Hello again, everybody. Kip Keefer filling in today, along with my partner, Terre Quillian, on the Doug Collins podcast. We are thrilled to be here because it's time to kind of call out to all Americans for action in light of so many things that we see swirling around us. And Terre, you and I have had a lot of substantive discussions over the last few years about how Americans, what's going to be the line of embarkation when things just get to the point of action is required. And I think we've reached that point.
I think we definitely have, Kip. I'm hoping that our fellow patriots know that talking and wringing our hands and being upset, that's a natural reaction to what has happened this past week. But I believe Steve Bannon has it right when he says, the time for talking is over. The time for action is now.
Yeah, and also I think it's really important, and it's probably a whole nother show, but just to mention on the front end here that a lot of the reasons that people aren't speaking up is fear of being chastised or sarcastically received or being criticized by people that have differing opinions. And that's not really what America's about. Cowering in the corner, worrying about, you being criticized by others is not the way to address righteousness. And, I think the real revealing thing in the book, The Radical's Handbook, written in the late 60s by Saul Alinsky, he said in these kind of leftist progressive movements that the biggest weapon they have to put down dissent is ridicule, and Americans need to put that aside. And it's time for everybody to step up and stand up for what's right.
Well, Kip, I feel like Americans are putting that aside. I feel like the events of the past week have made a lot of people feel like, okay, no more pretending here. Now that we see the face of evil, now that we see the links they're willing to go to, we have to do something about it. I think it's in America's nature to stand up for what is right. And I feel confident that people will. And then we have a long history in America. And I happen to live in Texas, and living in Texas, we have probably one of the greatest symbols in American history for individuals standing up for their own freedom. And that would be a battle that happened way back in the 1800s, right outside of San Antonio, Texas.
That's for sure. I mean, as good a rallying cry right now as any is the rallying cry from 1836. Remember the Alamo, because it is the primary example. And Terry, you and I talk about American exceptionalism on a regular basis and what the Judeo-Christian principles of that saying, biblical references to the city on the hill. It's not a boastful, braggadocious slogan. It is a call to action for all Americans that we need to maintain a level of complete dedication to what we are trying to be. It's really kind of a bar that's set extremely high, and no higher than, and I'll briefly tell you what we're alluding to. The Mexican Empire at the time in the early 1830s still territorially controlled what is now modern day Texas. And the 1833 election in Mexico put a man in office as president by the name of Santa Anna, who he's known in history as, but his actual name was Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, and he became president of Mexico and ran on the principle that they got to get Texas under control, because a lot of people had settled there as westward expansion, and a lot of movement in our country was taking place, and we're fostering a lot of industries and making a lot of money and establishing great lives for themselves. So Santa Anna took it upon himself as president of Mexico to put on a fancy military uniform and lead an excursion of 3,000 Mexican troops to come in and get Texas under control and put down the so-called Texas Revolution, because they wanted to break away from the Mexican Empire. And the very first encounter that Santa Anna and his troops had was in San Antonio, Texas, at a little mission/fort by the name of the Alamo. 257 Americans were there, Terry, knowing what they were facing, a whole army from another country. And these people all voluntarily chose to be there in that moment and to stand up for the principles of freedom and liberty and the removal of oppression. Santa Anna, with his 3,000 member force, made a preliminary request for them to surrender the fort. They refused and actually answered that official request with with cannon fire into the Mexican encampment, which was a pretty. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, and Kip, what's really a thing that most people wouldn't realize that, if you've been there, the Alamo wasn't really a fort.
No, a mission.
It was a Spanish mission. It didn't have any holes to shoot from. But, if you go and you visit old forts, you will see, and in Georgia, if you're down on St. Simon's and you go there to Fort Frederica, you'll see the holes at the top of the buildings, which were basically to be able to shoot rifles from. Well, the Alamo had none of those. All they had was they constructed catwalks up near the top.
Yes.
So soldiers could fire over the top. But the problem was, to fire over the top, Kip, your entire upper body was exposed.
Oh yeah, you had to rise up. There was no place to shield yourself.
No hiding. So when you're talking there about the fighting, it's almost a suicide mission every time you're firing over those walls.
Well, they were ingenious in, being outmanned 3,000 to about 257. They were ingenious in the way that they constructed the defenses, because somehow there was no modern heavy equipment. Somehow they got cannons up to that upper level on those catwalks on each of the walls. So as Mexican incursion forces started to engage the fort, they were able to shoot just devastating cannon fire right from the top of those reinforcements and wipe out just giant columns of the Mexican soldiers. And not just cannonballs, they gathered every kind of metal they had in the fort and stuffed those in the cannons. So this scatter shot, really kind of a remarkable idea at the time that was unheard of, that was really inflicting tremendous casualties on this superior force that kept having to retreat. And they held off, Terry, for 13 days. And that was critically important, because at the same time, because they were able to sneak out different dispatchers and people to get information to General Sam Houston, who was leading the traditional forces while the Mexicans were occupied in San Antonio, and massed a tremendous force to meet the Mexicans later on. And just 3 or 4 weeks later, because of what the guys at the Alamo were able to do, holding the Mexican army in check for 13 days before they finally fell, when the back wall of the Alamo was eventually just collapsed and they could pour in. It's just remarkable. These guys gave that last full measure of devotion because they were committed to the whole principle of liberty and freedom and the elimination of oppression. And it's so inspiring, and I think it's so indicative. Now, we're not suggesting you go down to your local mission, but there are things that Americans can do. And it's easy to throw up your hands and feel helpless. I'm just one person. What can I do? But you have some answers to that I find to be exceptional. And I hope you can share those with people, that they can do something.
Yes. I know how everybody feels. I spent this weekend feeling depressed, anxious, upset. You've got all of these emotions. And then realizing that the only thing that helps that feeling is to actually take action. And that's, for example, what the Texas troops did on April 21st when they went back and attacked Santa Ana. By the way, Kip, just a little nugget here, because you're such a history buff, you always know these things. But while there are rumors that possibly the cry, "Remember the Alamo," was used prior to that time, where it really came from was that the Mexican forces were brutal when they defeated the Texans. They slaughtered, they left the women and children, but they slaughtered every single soldier. The bloodlust was incredible. They would go over and poke them with bayonets and then repeatedly stab them. Unbelievable brutality that continued for hours after all those soldiers were dead. So when the Texans were then victorious over Santa Ana, he said to Sam Houston, "Now is the time for you to realize that you need to be gracious in victory." And Houston's response was, "You should have remembered that at the Alamo."
Yes, indeed.
Where the rallying cry came from in the beginning there was remembering it at the Alamo. So having that spirit of the Texan fighters, what we need to do is get up and fight. And there are easy things that people can do. Okay, the first thing, Kip, that a lot of people have done, because we've raised over $70 million, but one of the first things you can do is to donate to the Trump campaign. And I think it's easy to feel like, I can't really make a difference with what I can afford to give. For the first time in history, Kip, I look at the Trump campaign. I've never seen a campaign do this before. On any of their ads that they have asking you to donate, it starts with a line at the top, a disclaimer that says, "Do not donate it if you cannot afford it." That's amazing. And is part to me of the understanding that Donald Trump has about everyday ordinary working people in America and what we are facing right now. Very hard times. So if you can't make your rent payment, if you can't make your car payment, if you can't buy food for your family, don't donate. If you can do those three things, look at what the amount is you can donate. It's donaldjtrump.com. And Kip, $10, $20 makes a big difference. You don't have to be Miriam Adelson donating millions of dollars. The Republican Party's coffers have always been built by small donors. So $10, $20, if you think of people all over America doing that, that makes a big difference. So that's the first thing that you can do without leaving your house, is to help the campaign have the funds to fight these things. But
yeah, and the cool thing about that is, even if it's $10 or $20, you're investing in your country and your future. It's money well spent. And again, but your point can't be underemphasized, that, and I'm sure this comes from Donald Trump himself, to say, I want a disclaimer in there that if you can't afford to give, don't feel obligated to do so. Yes.
Right. My only point is that the amount you need to be able to afford is much lower than what most people think that it is. And having that number of gifts helps raise the spirit and raises the profile of the campaign.
Absolutely.
But there are a number of things you can do, Kip, that don't cost any money. And one of my favorites is something that allows you to make a big difference in the campaign without ever leaving your home. And that is to download Scott Pressler's app. Scott Pressler, who has really made such a huge difference in voter registration in the United States. I admire Scott, who is also a personal friend, so very much. His app is Early Vote Action, EVA. It's easy to get on the iTunes store to download Early Vote Action. So there are other things that Early Vote Action allows you to do too. To me, that is one of the easiest, to send text from my phone that I don't have to write or create. I just push a button.
Yes.
If you're uncomfortable doing that, another thing that makes a big difference, y'all, these things matter, is it shows you how to send postcards to voters that we are trying to work with, especially in Pennsylvania, for getting out the vote in all of these swing states. That is as simple as going to Target, buying the postcards and the cheapy stamps that go on postcards. And again, the message and the addresses are all preloaded for you. You can also choose to make phone calls to voters. All of those are things that you can do from your home. And if you're uncomfortable calling, that's the great thing about the texting and the sending postcards. You don't have to have any interaction to be able to do that. It's spectacular.
Well, and for people that are wondering, what's the goal here? We have watched in previous elections, the Democrats have done a remarkable job of enlisting everybody that they can possibly reach.
Oh, yeah.
And even in questionable ways in some cases, but the Republican Party has pretty much sat on their hands, and that's why there's been a big change at RNC headquarters, because the whole trend of this early voting, this mail-in voting, all of these different things, everybody who's available that has concerns about the direction this country's going, we have got to get them engaged now, because a lot of people just don't participate, or it's too troublesome. But there's so many different things just to get people introduced to the process and show them that it's not a big hassle to become politically active.
No, it's not. And there are many other things that you can do. A lot of the things I'm going to talk about center around voter registration, because that's really where it all gets started. In the state of Georgia, it's really easy to register to vote. You go to SOS, Secretary of State.ga.gov, and download an application. And Kip, when you read the instructions at the beginning of that Georgia voter application, they make it look really hard. Like you're going to send in the application to register to vote, and then you have to send these things that are proof of your address, a utility bill or this or this. That stuff makes me cringe. Then when you read further in the instructions, you see, or if you have a Georgia driver's license, you just enter that driver's license number. And if you don't have that, you enter the last 4 digits of your social security number, and then you don't need to send all that. And the form comes complete. The backside of the form is postage-free mailing instructions. All you got to do is tape or staple that piece of paper together, drop it in a mailbox, and that's it. So one of the things you can do is print off 5 or 10 of these and keep them with you in your briefcase or in your purse or wherever you go. I have voter registration forms for the state of Texas that I keep with me every time I get in an Uber and I start having a conversation with a driver. I have found out that Uber drivers are overwhelmingly supportive of Donald Trump in my town right now. These are people working hard. They are basically running their own small business. They understand what Joe Biden has done to the economy. But I asked the question, are you registered to vote at your current address? It's a great question. And part of the trick in that is the at your current address. Because I found that if I ask people, are you registered to vote? That can feel like a shameful thing for people to say, well, no.
Puts them on the defensive if the answer is no.
It absolutely does. Whereas, are you registered to vote at your current address? Again, thank you, Scott Pressler, for that. Doesn't do the same thing. It's really easy. And that allows people to go, well, actually, no, I'm not. I need to look into what to do. And it's great to be able to say, hey, I can make that easy for you. All you have to do is fill out this form, piece of cake. You do not need it to be notarized. All these things people have in their head, it has to be. No, that is not necessary at all. You fill it out, you mail it in, you're good to go. And then, Kip, it's not hard if you want to actually conduct some little mini voter registration drives. Great place to do that, for example, is at gun shows that are great place, because it's amazing the number of hunters and gun owners that are not registered to vote. It's really easy to become a deputy registrar. It involves a small training session, but you don't have to go in person to do that. In Georgia, you can do that via Zoom. So it's easy to go to that same website and look at what you have to do to become a deputy registrar. It's really a piece of cake. And then all that's involved at a gun show is a table with a small sign. Print out a bunch of those things. It's really easy to do. And again, through Early Vote Action, you can get a lot of the information on how to do that. That can make a big difference. I mean, the margin was very tight in Georgia the last time around. And what we need this time is a fraud-proof margin. The cheating works when the margins are slim, Kip. When it's set up and the polls show that it's going to be an overwhelming victory, it's a lot harder to pull that cheating off.
Well, and that's such an important point, because the quote panic that you're hearing in the media from the inner circles of the Democrat Party and the White House right now are a reaction to polling data that's coming in that shows that their position is becoming more and more tenuous. But that is not reason to say, okay, we got this in the bag. What that is, Terry, is a call to action for everybody to widen that gap and take away any opportunity for any kind of electoral shenanigans.
Absolutely. And what we need to do is to have that be the way it is now, for that to be very obvious, for it to be that not only are the polls showing Trump strengthening, but when you show voter registration numbers shifting heavily to the Republicans, that's another big sign. Do you know we are at the edge of flipping the voter registration in Bucks County, Pennsylvania?
That's incredible.
Which is absolutely huge. Now, one of the things I believe we're going to get is we're going to get Democrats voting for President Trump. But it's really crucial we have every possible Republican registered to vote this time around. And shifting voter registration numbers are another important thing for the public perception. And we need that perception to be as strong as possible, because, Kip, I do not believe that they're not going to try the same shenanigans all over again. I believe they're absolutely going to try it one more time this time.
Yeah, I mean, they've got a lot of financial structure and time and effort invested. One thing we don't talk enough in this country about the George Soros effect and other people, the Rockefellers, the Fitzgers, they're the heirs to the Hyatt fortune. These are far left individuals with millions and millions of dollars at their disposal, and they have methodically, Terry, invested in the infrastructure of our country. A lot of Americans may not realize. I use this quote all the time, and I know you're tired of hearing it because I use it on just about every program we do. But Joseph Stalin said exactly correctly, one of the worst dictators in the history of the world, that it doesn't matter who casts the vote, it matters who counts the votes. And all over this country, by investing, I should say, millions and millions of dollars in local elections, they control secretaries of state and county clerks and people that are on the front line of controlling elections. It's just one of the things that they've done to kind of turn the tide in recent years. And like you said, with that in place, if it's an overwhelming victory with just a tremendous margin of difference, really, no matter what they have invested and who they have in place, they can't affect that kind of outcome.
Well, Kip, you're bringing up something that's another point. It's something that anybody can do that will make a huge difference.
This is a great one, yeah.
One of the things that the Republicans have suffered from is that we never have enough poll watchers. We never have enough folks there at the polls. I think part of it has to do with the Republicans are employed and have jobs. It makes it much harder. But this is a crucial thing. And so the Trump campaign has launched a website that is TrumpForce47.com. TrumpForce47.com. When you go to TrumpForce47.com, it will give you lots of different ways that you can choose to get involved in the campaign. One of the things you can sign up to be a captain in Trump Force 47, and the things that it asks you to do are so small to be a captain. But you can sign up to do door knocking in your neighborhood. You can sign up to make phone calls. You can sign up to deliver yard signs to your friends and neighbors who you know are supporting President Trump. And importantly, you can check a box there to become a poll watcher. Now, you can go to the Georgia Secretary of State website and look and do it that way, or you can just go to TrumpForce47.com and sign up to become a poll watcher. Kip, we need an overabundance of poll watchers for this election. That is absolutely critical. We cannot let what happened in DeKalb County last time happen again.
Well, there are hundreds of reports and people's personal testimonies that tried to be Republican oriented poll watchers in the last election, and they were able to use the excuse of COVID to keep them back, in some cases 100 or 150 feet. Well, you can't perform duties of verifying that the ballot counting is going smoothly and fairly if you're a half a football field away. Two
things about that, Kip. They won't have that excuse this time.
Exactly. So let's overwhelm them with people.
They depend on us complying with their ridiculous rules. There is nothing in the law that allows them to force poll watchers to be 150 feet back. Nothing. They get away with it because we complied. Don't comply. Do not do that. Learn the rules that govern the polls and poll watching, and then get there and stick to your guns. Be more like the forces at the Alamo, because this time we're not going to be like the forces at the Alamo that lose. We're going to be like the forces that were back 17 days later in April being victorious over Santa Ana. And part of it is overwhelming them with people, with bodies.
Absolutely.
It is one day out of the year, one day. Think how much more it's going to cost you. Much more than missing one day of work if we end up with Joe Biden in office for another 4 years.
You mentioned DeKalb County. Of course, I want to fill in that rest of that. DeKalb County at one point declared they had some technical problems and it's getting late. Now we're going to resume this in the morning. They sent everybody home, allegedly, all the polls.
We went home. That's the foolish thing. We left.
Yeah, they told them to go home. We're not going to count anymore tonight. And they left. And guess what they did an hour later? Resumed counting.
Exactly.
I mean, heinous. And these things are documented. This is not urban myth. This is from actual witnesses who came back the next morning only to find they've been counting for hours without any kind of monitoring.
Exactly. And that's where we also need our people, Trump supporters, to become election judges. Again, it's an easy thing to do with a short training that you can do online. And an election judge has a tremendous amount of power. Every polling place should have a Republican and a Democrat election judge. Sadly, Kip, in a lot of places, we didn't have people because we didn't have enough volunteers who signed up to do that. And you can see from the last stolen election how crucial that is to have those election judges. Again, it's a thing that is not hard. You don't have to be all knowing. It's a short training. You can learn what to do. And then all you have to do is be there and stick to your guns. It's not hard.
Yeah, it's absolutely essential. And there's a lot of people listening, I'm sure, that live in very red states and say, well, my participation's not that important because, my state's going to vote, in the Trump or Republican category to try and flip the script here of what we're seeing happening. But no matter where you live, you need to get involved because the 7 swing states are absolutely critical. And Terry, you just mentioned a few minutes ago, although you're in Texas, you're concentrating all of your efforts on Pennsylvania, which may be the most critical swing state.
Exactly. And I don't have to know anything about Pennsylvania. Guys, I don't. And I'm not calling people that I know in Pennsylvania. I'm getting that information from early vote action. That's the toolkit that is allowing me to make that happen. And another thing, if you feel like you're in a deep red state, we're working hard on turnout here in Texas because if you go all the way back to, the George Bush election, if you remember, one of the things that had the first Donald Trump election in 2016, they want to pull out the popular vote. They used the popular vote back with Al Gore when he was trying to unseat the election of George W. Bush. And they talk about in a book that I read afterwards about that what allowed them to contest Florida and to do that was they were using the bludgeon of, we won the popular vote. Guys, we need to win the popular vote this time. That is part of what will help us stop the steal this time around.
Well, I mentioned this to you in a previous discussion, and we're getting close to the end, but I do want to bring up the fact that what you just said is very key because in a whole lot of American elections, if you look back at presidential elections since the beginning of the George Washington administration, of course, there was no election there. He was proclaimed the original president, but every election since, there have been a large number of times where the popular vote is it does not reflect the outcome because again, if it was just based on, and this is where they always say, we're a democracy. Well, a democracy is the majority rules. We are not a democracy by design. We are a republic because we want to give every vote in every corner of the country equal weight. And the Electoral College, which is based on the population of your state, is what determines how that happens. And so many times the popular vote is not reflective of the will of the totality of the citizens of America. So it's something important to consider. So anytime anyone makes that argument, that is not how the founders set that up because otherwise, why would we even bother to vote here in Alabama or other places when New York, California are going to have so many people voting that they're going to win. They're going to determine every presidential election. The conception of the founders was absolutely brilliant in this area to make a guy's vote in Montana just as important as somebody in California.
Absolutely. But Kip, we still want to have the strongest turnout we possibly can.
Oh, absolutely.
Popular vote, which is why even if you're living in a red state, your vote matters. And not only does it matter in the presidential side, there are always down ballot elections that are there too. So it's really, really important that we get our people to the polls. It's a crucial thing. And, I was involved back, in that George Bush campaign. I'm really dating myself here. But what was so frustrating to us then is if we had known they were going to use this popular vote myth thing as a way to try to steal that election, as George Bush said, we could have just done a massive turnout campaign in Texas and changed that popular vote scenario, but we didn't. This time, I'm wanting a belt and suspenders. I'm going to do everything we can to show the strength behind President Trump. So yes, it's the Electoral College that makes the difference, but let's turn out as many votes as we possibly can for Donald J. Trump. And Kip, I just want to emphasize to people the amazing thing from that early vote action app. If I am at the grocery store and there's a long line ahead of me, I'm a very impatient person. Normally I'd be like, oh, gosh, I have to wait in this line. Now I look at it and go, I bet I can get off 4 or 5 texts to voters while I'm waiting in this line. pop up the app. I'm standing there in line because it really doesn't require any brain power to do this. And I'll pop up 4 or 5 messages to folks that we want to make sure are registered to vote in Bucks County. I get those messages off while I'm waiting in line. And all of a sudden I feel like, well, that was time well spent. That gave me an opportunity to do that while I'm sitting here waiting. So it's actually also a really good mental health tool for those of us that are angry and upset about what's going on. I keep reminding myself, don't get angry, get ahead. Get ahead by doing something positive to help our chances this time around.
So that's a good way to sum this up. Don't be angry. Don't be frustrated. Be motivated. Get in the game. Do what you can do. Terry gave you some great examples. Engage people in conversations. Absolutely. Don't shy away from that. Again, who cares if somebody who is so warped that they think that things are just hunky dory right now, and let's not rock the boat. Let's give Biden 4 more years, a guy who doesn't even know what day it is and has completely, with the being the puppet that he is, the people pulling the strings, which is largely the previous administration. The Obama folks are all surrounding him. But Terry, terrifying to me is so much of the decision making now are being made by lifelong Washington bureaucrats who are totally anonymous. Nobody knows who they are. They're making so much of the policy in this country. We didn't vote for them. They're not elected. This has got to stop.
And Kip, when you talk about engaging people in conversation, I don't ever argue with people who say they're going to vote for Biden. Those aren't the people that we're trying to target. If I ask somebody about who they're supporting, which I do all the time, and they say Joe Biden, I just say, I'm sorry to hear that. That's really unfortunate. And I move on. I don't argue because you are not going to change somebody's mind by arguing.
No.
The point is to find people that are the hidden Trump supporters, which there are many. And I have been intentionally trying to make sure that when I encounter people in the minority community, I am asking this question, which is very easy to encounter here in Texas, where we have a very large Hispanic, Latino, and Black populations. I'm asking them, who are you supporting? And if they say, oh, I don't know, that's great. That's an opening. And if they say, well, I'm supporting Donald Trump, that's the perfect time to say, that's fantastic. Are you registered to vote at your current address?
That's perfect.
It's not about arguing with Biden supporters. That is a low leverage thing. That's not going to bring you anything but emotional angst.
Yes.
And doing that and engaging people is to engage the supporters or to engage those people who are on the fence.
Yeah.
Those are the people that we want to talk to. When somebody's a strong Biden supporter, I'm like, oh, that's unfortunate. Let it go. I don't want to have an argument because that's a low percentage activity right there.
Terry, this has been fantastic. You're a great American and you're doing your part, and all of us need to step up and do the same. Terry and I are going to be back here on the Doug Collins podcast on Friday. We're going to talk about more specifics relating to the election, maybe have a special guest to be bringing us a very spiritual message that all Americans need to hear. So a lot in the works. We are excited to have the opportunity to speak to all of you here on the Doug Collins podcast. And we thank you for listening today. Our great appreciation to our producer, James Simone, and to Doug for allowing us to step in here. Have a great week, everybody. God bless America. Get to the wheel. Put your shoulder in. We need everybody pulling in the same direction. For Terry Quillian, this is Kip Keefer wishing you a very pleasant day, and we will see you again on Friday.